Hello, everyone. I welcome you all to yet another session that we have here in T2F on education and online learning. The previous session we had was with Mr. Pravez Hipoy. This session will be with two of the most interesting individuals that you'll ever meet. One of them is Dr. Arshad. Dr. Arshad is the current Vice-Chancellor of LUMS. He served as the Vice Provost in Teaching and Learning and Director of the MacPherson Institute and McMaster University in Canada. And the other individual that is joining us is Dr. Suleiman Shahid. Dr. Suleiman Shahid is currently the Assistant Professor of Computer Science. He is also the Director of LUMS Learning Institute, which deals greatly with the online learning resource center that they have. On to the talk now.
Bahut shukriya. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. I'm doing quite fine. 9 hours behind you in Montreal, Canada at the moment.
Oh. 9 hours behind.
Thank you, Shumaila. I'm also very well in Lahore right now, 5 p.m., heading towards my dinner in an hour.
Well, I thank both of you for being here and taking out the time for this conversation. It is a brief background on the online learning experience that students have shared, seeing that, we're nearing the oh my God. We're kind of at a point where graduations have happened as well, and people have had these online experiences which are all the frenzy for now. We'll head on to the discussion of the first learning experiences all of you had. When the pandemic struck, it took us all for a surprise, and we all kind of maneuvered our way through online learning and online education, especially the students and especially the professors. So I wanted to start with your sentiments, both of you, your sentiments as representing an institution like LUMS, and also as individual sentiments you gathered from people around you on the online learning idea. We can start with Dr. Arshad.
Sure. As you said, Shumaila, that it caught everyone by surprise, and not just at LUMS, but or in Pakistan, but around the world. And most people, of course, were neither anticipating this nor prepared for it. In fact, there have been, in online learning is nothing new. It has been around for many decades in other parts of the world. And of course, many institutions have embraced it in a way that is now the new normal for them. Nothing new under the sun with online learning. But many other institutions haven't. And particularly in Pakistan, there are several reasons why they haven't. But that's what we actually found ourselves doing. So what has the experience been? The experience has been bumpy for many. It has been challenging, as we just pointed out, for the majority of people. But I wouldn't say for all, because this was on our radar long before COVID struck. In fact, we had been investing in some infrastructure, and in particular, some courses that had a singular purpose. And that purpose was to give access to students way beyond the ones we register in our programs, so that they too could participate in quality learning experiences, either by course or through some certificate programs or diplomas that we were building up. And we were doing this through continuing education. This is a center we have within LUMS. We were doing this through our Rousing Executive Development Center, which is another center through which we do training for management-related skill sets. And then, of course, we were doing this through our schools and through our disciplines. And we have 5 schools, as you know, each of them very much interested in putting something out there that would excite a broad sector of young and whoever was interested in learning. I mean, the key was, आपको अगर सीखना है, तो हम आपके लिए सिखाने के लिए तैयार, बिल्कुल तैयार होंगे. So I think in that we had anticipated quite a bit of this, and so this transition for a number of people at LUMS was quite smooth. It wasn't, oh my God, what do we do? Actually, we had a studio. Suleiman will, I'm sure, talk about that. It's a world-class studio with all the facilities for creating the learning environments that are necessary in terms of making this transition smooth, but also a mindset that we are preparing ourselves for a platform that should not, and this is I'll end on this point, is not something we should compare directly with offline or classroom learning. It's just a different medium. So the apple and orange comparisons that take place regularly, कि ये बेहतर है या वो बेहतर है, ये बेहतर वाली बात नहीं है, ये सिर्फ ये है कि अलग है. अब वो दोनों में अच्छे होते हैं और बुरे होते हैं. So it's not so much this medium is better, that medium is better. It's about what kind of quality experience can you have online, just as you can ask the question, what kind of quality experience can you have offline?
Okay. Dr. Sulaiman, if you want to.
Yeah. Sure. I will agree with Dr. Arshad in many of the points, because we've been exploring this space at LUMS together, and the concept of LUMS Learning Institute with one of the verticals primarily focusing on technology enhanced learning was there before COVID-19. So when sort of one of our colleagues said this, all hell broke loose, there was this whole chaos happening. Then how do we manage? It was problematic, but on the other hand, we were thinking about online education way before that. So what happened actually, this pandemic, I would say, partially worked in our favor, that it sort of started putting bigger and larger and more robust wheels under our online education initiative. We wanted to invest in this direction. After the pandemic, we thought we want to invest in a more systematic way and rather more quickly in this direction. The studio was already in place. We thought that how can we improve it and make sure that it offers much wider range of services to the larger faculty pool. We started an initiative on massively online open courses, not only for LUMS, but also LUMS' responsibility towards the rest of the Pakistan, So how can we entertain and, of course, help our own LUMS community and LUMS family, but also how can we open ourselves as a more inclusive university for the rest of the Pakistan and maybe the rest of the world, So LUMS being one of the top universities in the region, we think whatever we produce would not be world-class, would not be excellent for the local population, but we can actually produce something which is world-class quality, and we can compete with the courses happening anywhere in the world. So that was the motivation even before that, but I think pandemic really helped us in being more crisp about our plans and more robust and quicker about our plans. Having said this, last point would be on this, that of course it is a disruption, and it is not an easy sailing, not for the faculty, neither for the faculty nor for the student body. And primarily because of a very valid point Dr. Arshad raised at his end, that many people think is a translation, from an offline environment to an online environment. And that's not the case. You don't move from offline to online. You redesign for online. You think about it as a new medium with its own logistics and constraints and opportunities. So if you translate from offline to online, you take a big baggage with you, and that baggage actually doesn't really help you much because it affects at two levels. At the first level, it sets the wrong expectation for students because they think ये तो हमें offline मिल रहा था, तो सब कुछ हमें वैसा ही online भी मिल जाएगा. और वो नहीं मिल सकता क्योंकि मीडियम ही फर्क है. You're not face to face, वो ना engagement हो सकती है, ना बात हो सकती है, ना group, like everything changes. So वो तो expectation ही खराब हो जाती है. And second thing is कि हम faculty अपने लिए भी गलत expectation set कर लेती है. So I think the point is that treat it as two different mediums, orange and pears, and see how individually you can do some innovation in this. And I think that has been a fundamental difference in the way LUMS is trying to address this topic.
If I can jump back in, Shumela, something
Yes,
Dr. Sulaiman said that I think is also really I want to underline, And luckily, he's here with us as the director. He wears many hats, but one of his hats that I particularly admire is the one that he's taken on as the director for the LUMS Learning Institute that you heard him mention. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up again is not to just promote an institute, but to talk about why it is fundamentally important to have something like this institute. You can call it whatever you may. Center for Learning is very common in other parts of the world. For example, in Canada, every university has a Center for Teaching and Learning. In Pakistan, you only have one or two among the 200 universities. You may have some forms of it, but what the importance of a LUMS Learning Institute is not only that it has a big part of its support related to online learning, यानी स्टूडियो है या वीडियोग्राफर्स हैं या डिजिटल मीडिया असिस्टेंट्स हैं, डिजाइनर्स हैं, ये तो एक जगह पर है. I mean, this is important. But just as important is this transition that we are talking about in terms of skill sets that you need to succeed in teaching online. And for that, you need support. You can't just expect faculty members who are very busy people. I mean, these guys aren't just sitting and twiddling their thumbs. They have, research agendas. They have service or responsibilities. They have families. They have their lives, of course. But they're extremely busy people. And then to ask them to completely transform 30 साल से ये यूं पढ़ा रहे थे या 10 साल से यूं पढ़ा रहे थे, एकदम से आप बस एक नए स्किल सेट लेके शुरू कर रहे हैं. This is just not realistic. So I think it's the responsibility for every institution to have a center like this, and the support is really pedagogical. And this is, write it in caps and bold, underline it. Pedagogy will lead technology, not the other way around. So there's another confusion people have is turn some kind of switch on, which is called, ed tech or something tech, and everything will be done for you. It doesn't work like that. You can buy equipment, you can buy servers, you can buy infrastructure, you can have studio, you can have all the bells and whistles. But the essence is going to be pedagogy. And the training required for pedagogy comes from an institute like this. You have to have leadership in showing what are the pedagogical models here? What are the frameworks in which we are going to teach online? What are some things, what are best practices? What works, what doesn't work? So without this, you have then individuals who are shooting darts. And there's nothing cohesive in a strategy for an institution to go online. And this is what I see many of our sister universities struggling with. It's no fault of theirs. कि वो एकदम से उनको ये गिफ्ट दे दिया गया है कि जैसे सुलेमान ने कहा ये opportunities हैं. These are opportunities. So you can't embrace these opportunities unless you are also having a very carefully thought out center that supports faculty, and that has to be pedagogy first. So I thought I'd mention that because this is missing right now in Pakistan, and this is something I think we should all pay attention to.
Yeah. As you said, it's very important. I can hear my echo. As you said, that it's very important to have sort of support and resource for professors and for teaching aides and the teaching assistants there, and the resources to facilitate your students. But moving on to the development side, moving on to how this is very new for the greater masses of your students to actually also adhere to. How do you think it was, by your experience of online learning and online teaching for now, how was it for the students? How was it a smooth sailing process for them? Did they adhere to it nicely or well? Because there is a nationwide disparity between technological lack of resource and even educational lack of resource. So if you could share a bit on that.
Who would you like to start off with?
Anyone who feels like, oh, this is something that I want to really address.
No, Arshad, go ahead and I'll add.
You have great questions, so I'm sure both of us want to say something to all of your questions. I'm happy to start, or Suleiman, if you'd like to start, I have no problem going.
I believe we can take
please,
you, Dr.
No, please go ahead, Arshad.
Dr. Arshad first, and then we can then move on to Dr. Suleiman.
So I think from the student point of view, clearly, there were connectivity issues. I mean, we would be ignorant if we didn't recognize that there are some serious constraints. And you might say, well, why for LUMS? Because LUMS ke andar to bahut people who are there have all the resources. They come from, rich elite families. Wrong. Let's get that straight. First of all, LUMS has just as diverse a population of students as you would find in any other university, or maybe more so, I would say, because of our national outreach program, because of the financial aid that we are very big on in terms of access, right? So 1 out of 3 students is getting that aid. 1 out of 10 students getting full 120% support, and they're coming from remote areas. They are coming from, you pick your province, and we have students from those provinces. In fact, 162 villages, towns, and cities across the country. So, of course, you're going to have connectivity problems. Fatah mein hai, Balochistan mein hai, pick your village, and we have students from there. So, yes, a lot of those students, you can imagine. अभी हम बात कर रहे हैं, अगर आपकी कुछ कनेक्टिविटी में हो जाए तो ये प्रोग्राम उल्टा हो जाएगा बिल्कुल. The same thing happens in a classroom, right? You're sitting and listening and you don't hear, or your electricity drops off, or you don't have the right device, you don't have the bandwidth. And कल एग्जाम है, उन्होंने अभी स्लाइड्स भेजी हैं, लेकिन अरे मेरे पास तो स्लाइड नहीं पहुंची है, अब मैं क्या करूंगा. ये छोड़ें कि भाई घर में आप अगर पढ़ नहीं सकते हैं, आपको 2-3 घंटे कहीं और जाके बैठना है, 6 घंटे बैठना है, किसी से 4-5 कोर्सेज में शामिल हो आप. This is a real challenge for students. So the first thing, of course, is to address the connectivity issues. We gave devices to all the students who needed them. We did surveys, etc. I won't go into those details, but that is a big issue for students. The second issue, I would say, probably bigger than connectivity, is that all of a sudden, आपका माहौल बदल गया है. You don't have a classroom, you don't have the supports, you don't have a campus, you don't have your friends, you don't have, the list goes on and on. What do you have? Well, you have a bunch of parents and siblings, maybe many people in your home who are constantly coming and going, where there are, all kinds of home issues, in particular for women. Who are unfortunately given tasks that men aren't given. And so they do double duty and find themselves torn between family-related issues and, of course, the learning time and tasks that they have to accomplish. So this has been particularly difficult. Mahal jo hai, learning environment jo hai, wo completely badal gaya hai. So ye dusri baat hai. अब वो तीसरी बात ये है कि देखें, अगर आप जो सुलेमान साहब कह रहे थे, अगर आप, if you're living in the past, you're not going to embrace the future. So constantly, a lot of our students are saying, it used to be like that. It isn't like that anymore. Of course, it isn't like that anymore. It isn't like that for anybody anywhere in the world anymore. And the world has changed we've got a global pandemic. So then we have the question of how are people going to, adapt? How are they going to take this on in terms of a leadership role rather than a follower role? How are you going to show others that in this difficult, in this challenging environment, what are you doing that's different? What are you doing to show people that you can make a difference in other people's lives? So I think the second part about Mahal has a lot to do with how individually we are all reacting to this, right? And if we're going to live in the past, we're going to be pretty depressed about this whole thing. But if you find that right now there is such a need that your fellow students have, and your communities have, and your homes have, this is a time that you can really make a difference in some people's lives, including your own. So I'll stop there for a moment, but I think there is a bag of both challenges and opportunities, and students can, will remember this as one of those times in their life जो होता ही नहीं है. मेरी जिंदगी में इस तरह तो नहीं हुआ था. Maybe मेरे parents में they went through 2 world wars, उनका हुआ था. But this is a event of that magnitude where दुनिया बदल गई है. And we can't be spectators and watch this from the side. We have to get our hands dirty, and our students are the ones we look up to in leading the way.
Dr. Shahid, if you have something to add to this.
I think Dr. Arshad very nicely summed it up, and more importantly, I think one of my favorite topic, which I very passionately in almost every meeting with strong expressions on my face, I tell to the world that, the environment has changed, and it's bold caps underlined. We as students have learned how to learn in a very specific way. We have learned that अगर ये सीखना है तो उसका तरीक़ेकार ये होगा, उसमें ये सपोर्ट चाहिए है, इसके पास जाना है, इस कोने में बैठ के सीखूंगा. कैलकुलस पढ़नी है तो वो दरख्त के नीचे 3 लोगों के साथ बैठ के कैलकुलस पढ़ने का मजा आता है. उसका so we have this proximity with the location, with people, and we have designed a complete system around learning, and the system is not only on the cognitive level but also on the emotion and the spatial level. And when you break this whole system, all of a sudden expect students to behave as normal, it's just a wrong expectation. So I think one of the things at LUMS, which I'm very happy about, that we at least try to do, हमने अपने expectation management पे काम किया. हमने कहा है कि in terms of students and instructors के हम as instructors and faculty member अपनी expectations को कैसे revisit करेंगे, because we want to be the best in the world. Every instructor would say कि मेरे course में अगर आपने ये नहीं पढ़ा तो तबाही आ गई. That's I don't care about the rest of the world. मेरे से आपने ये learning outcomes लेके ही जाना है. And when you start combining these things in a semester, when you combine all these things, it's just not going to happen. So I think what we did actually, one of the things we paid attention to, we immediately made a very interesting committee from all schools and then said that how do we address these issues? And it should look like a reaction both on the logistical part as well as on the pedagogy part. So मेरे ख्याल में expectations को हमने fine tune किया कि अपना course की learning outcome को कैसे थोड़ा सा कम कर सकते हैं, अपनी assessment को कैसे revisit कर सकते हैं, final exam होना चाहिए नहीं होना चाहिए, आपकी formative assessment कैसे change होनी चाहिए, बच्चों की grading कैसे करनी चाहिए. ठीक है, there were news in the town कि बहुत सी universities ये मानने को तैयार ही नहीं थी कि a semester can be marked as pass and fail. But we at a very, very early stage, like maybe one of the first ones in the town who said कि ये वैसे grading नहीं होगी जैसे पहले होती थी. We'll do it in a different way, and we followed international practices. So I think it would be a bad idea कि हम एक बच्चा जो पिछले 18-20 साल से खास तरीके से सीख रहा था, उससे आप expect करें कि वो नए तरीके से सीखना शुरू कर दे. But मैं हमेशा अपने students को ये भी कहता हूँ कि यार आप ये भी सोचे कि हमें खास तरीके से पढ़ा रहे थे, तो हमसे एक्सपेक्ट करना कि सुबह उठेंगे और हम शेव करने के बाद एक नए इंस्ट्रक्टर बन जाएंगे, that's also not very easy. So we're both going through this very nice process where we are renegotiating, we're working together as a team, we are partners in this. Actually LUMS के अंदर एक हम प्रोग्राम कर रहे हैं आजकल जिसको हम कहते हैं Students as Partners program. Students as co-researchers, students as co-investigators, students as co-designers. यानी आपने कोर्स रीडिजाइन करना है, स्टूडेंट्स के साथ कोर्स रीडिजाइन करें, आपने नया कोर्स बनाना है. ये लर्निंग इंस्टीट्यूट का एक खास प्रोग्राम है जिसमें हम कहते हैं कि स्टूडेंट्स आर पार्टनर्स इन दिस होल एक्सरसाइज, एंड देयर इज नेवर अ बेस्ट टाइम और बेटर टाइम इन पाकिस्तान और एनीवेयर एल्स जहां पे आपको स्टूडेंट्स को एज अ पार्टनर इन्वॉल्व करना है. उसकी वजह ये है कि हम सब काम ही नया कर रहे हैं. तो आप ये नहीं कह सकते, मैं ये नहीं कह सकता जाके अपने स्टूडेंट्स को कि मुझे तुमसे ज्यादा पता है इस चीज के ऊपर. वो कहेगा आपको कैसे पता है, पेंडेमिक तो हुई है, उसके बाद ये इफेक्ट आया है, आप भी उतने ही बुरे हैं जितना मैं बुरा हूँ, या आप भी उतने ही अच्छे जितना मैं अच्छा हूँ, तो लेट्स वर्क टुगेदर. So I think this is a very interesting time for us as a educational community, as instructors and students, to embrace this. और जिस दिन हमने इस mindset को लेके आगे चले, students would be our partners and they'll have more empathy towards us. And of course we'll have more empathy towards them. हमें किसी किस्म के रहम की जरूरत नहीं है कि उन पर रहम कर रहे हैं. We use the term कि हम उनको कैसे lenient हो जाए. You don't need to be lenient to students. You just need to respect कि उनके मसले genuine हैं. So I think ये partnership की approach बहुत जरूरी है. And I think this is a term we use all the time at LUMS now. मतलब हमारे हर program के अंदर हर चीज में हम ये कह रहे हैं students as partners. And I think that's a way to move forward in my opinion. Shumaila, mute पे हैं, sorry.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Seeing to it that both the students and the instructors and all institutions are kind of involved in the pandemic, it doesn't affect everyone differently. It affects everyone all the same. There are different ways to adhere to it, and I feel like there are generous developments made by LUMS in this regard. When you call students as partners, you're also sharing the sort of experience with them, a learning experience of its own. As an institution, those are the developments happening with LUMS. Those are the developments happening everywhere. There were a lot of news popping up in the start about how online education itself, as a mode of teaching, as a school of thought, it can revolutionize the entire education system or the entire education pathway, right? I'm drawing from the conversation we had with Mr. Pervez Hudboy, where he kind of listed down online education as something that can revolutionize education for everyone, because it provides you with an opportunity of an online repository for everyone to access and for students to have equal learning opportunities. Apart from just taking your opinions on it, I also wanted to know on a very nationwide level, like on a very governmental ministry level, when this pandemic struck, institutions took their own, case in their own hands, and they kind of worked their way or maneuvered their way towards something that could benefit the students and the institution. But has there been any development or change or a narrative going on a ministry level of how this issue can be resolved, or online education can be taken as a spectacle of progress on its own and, tweaked here and there for the greater audience, for the greater masses?
Dr. Arshad, can I take a more specific answer, and then you can talk about more satellite view on a higher level, because you're a part of a larger conversation. So I'll not answer the ministry level. I think Dr. Arshad can address that better. I'll talk about briefly about LUMS, that why for LUMS, for any university, it is important to give back in this online education scenario के अंदर. हमारे केस में we believe कि every institute in its own capacity can contribute back. LUMS के अंदर, we're also thinking, we're of course talking about it. हम कह रहे हैं कि आपने masses के लिए basis के ऊपर आपने कैसे affect करना है. Or I think this is an interesting way to sort of relate to one of our very interesting initiatives. वो ये कि हम एक online platform बना रहे हैं, जिसको हम LUMS X कहते हैं. LUMS X का जो platform है, on a similar model, but I think even a more interesting model than Harvard X and MIT X, वो ये है कि आप कैसे अपने courses को, how can LUMS have an online campus? And diverse online campus which address the needs for both the local LUMS family, but also anybody else in the world, more importantly, people in Pakistan. And through offering executive education, through executive lifelong learning, but also, offering some of our specialized courses as a form of massively online courses. And एक course इस पे भी हम काम कर रहे हैं, वो है learning how to learn. And that's a fundamental course जो आपको बताता ही है कि आपने सीखना कैसे है. आप चाहे offline सीखें, चाहे आप online सीखें, there is a process to learning. There's a process कि आपने कोई चीज़ याद कैसे रखनी है, किसी चीज़ को समझना कैसे है, आपका दिमाग काम कैसे करता है, रट्टा कब नहीं लगाना चाहिए, टाइम टेबल की क्या अहमियत है, सोना कब है, उठना कब है, अपने आप पे जुल्म नहीं करना, don't be hard on yourself, like basic fundamental principles coming from science. And I think what we have done, it's a very, very world's famous course by Barbara Oakley, Learning How to Learn. We have completely translated that score. We have translated in an indigenous fashion. हम अपनी मसाले लेके आए हैं. हमने अगर आप हम उसमें हुक्के की बात करते हैं, और उसमें हम कैरम बोर्ड की बात करते हैं, और उसमें हम वो मसालों की बात करते हैं जो गांव में बैठा बच्चा भी सीख सकता है. वो उर्दू की बात सारा कोर्स है. So I think one of the ways what we have done as an institute is to sort of give back, or maybe set the right foundation for learning, is that by helping people understand how to learn. and then उसके अलावा I think एक और चीज़ वो साइड टॉपिक है जिस पे मेरे ख्याल डॉक्टर अरशद ज़रूर जाएंगे कि ये सब चीज़ें तभी पॉसिबल होंगी जब आप अपने टीचर्स को, अपने फैकल्टी को ट्रेन कर सकते हैं. So they need to be able to run this whole show as the champions. और हम LUMS के अंदर, of course, we're working on a very interesting program of Train the Trainers program. You know, हम इसको faculty development program कहते हैं. और learning how to learn program उसके साथ बहुत अच्छा fit हो जाता है. पहले आप सीखें कि आपने सीखना कैसे. उसका उर्दू में हमने नाम रखा सीखना सीखें. You know, and आप पहले सीखना सीखें, खुद सीखें, फिर आप ये सीखें कि आपने लोगों को कैसे सिखाना है. And then you're a good teacher. And I think ये दोनों चीजें कि आपने बच्चों पे कैसे फोकस करना है, बड़ों पे कैसे फोकस करना है, आई थिंक these two things have to be upgraded all the way up at a government level, and then see कि आपने बच्चों को कैसे सपोर्ट करना है, आपने फैकल्टी को कैसे सपोर्ट करना है, and then आपने organizational change को कैसे सपोर्ट करना है in the form of policies. And I think that's where Dr. Arshad can give sort of more high level input.
Yes, Dr. Arshad.
Ji, thank you, Suleiman. Incidentally, Dr. Oakley came to Pakistan, first to Islamabad, then to Lahore, then to Karachi. And you may have seen her in Karachi, maybe that's when I introduced her back 2 years ago. I mean, so this was way before COVID struck. We wanted to do this as far back, and she has given us intellectual property rights for her course. This is the most subscribed course in the world, with over 2 million participants who've taken it. And now it is almost ready in Urdu for Pakistanis and hopefully beyond. देखें, आपने जो सवाल पूछा था about you know, the idea, Dr. Hoodboy was your previous guest, and he talked about a repository and you know, something of a national kind of a strategy for a revolution. Okay, my own thinking about that is, I think what he was saying was beyond, okay, let's have a repository. Actually, we already have repositories. You have a MIT open course where you have all kinds of courses that are free, available, accessible. So why isn't everyone going and using them? I mean, repositories by themselves aren't going to do the trick. That is, I think his point, if I understood him correctly, was you have to make education more transparent. So he wants to see quality go up. अब वो ये कह रहे थे मेरी समझ में कि लोग इतना प्राइवेट कर लिया है उन्होंने एजुकेट अपना पढ़ाने को, किसी को पता नहीं कि पढ़ा रहे क्या हैं भाई, आपके क्लासरूम में हो रहा क्या है, आपके कोर्स मटेरियल्स हैं क्या, आपकी कोर्स आउटलाइन है या नहीं है, आपके, I mean, what are the ingredients that are being used? His point was about transparency, and the repository is a way of making things more transparent, not necessarily of great use to anyone. I mean, students aren't going to go to 1 million courses that are there and figure out which one to take. This has been done in other countries, and a very few providers have succeeded in putting together courses, degrees, and programs like Coursera, like edX, like FutureLearn. So there are some that have succeeded, but for Pakistan to do that right now, I think we have many other things we can do that will have a much higher impact. So what are some of the other things we can do that have an impact? Let's keep in mind, aapka ye bhi sawal tha, is technology going to transform and change and revolutionize learning? Dekhein, technology has been doing that since you know, generations and generations ago. You can take examples that were transformative, you know, going back to whether it was electricity or the radio or television or computers or more recently the internet, and now we have you know, these massive open online courses and what have you, and a lot of platforms that allow people to easily go in and out to access learning. But I don't think that's really the answer. The answer is not just investing in tools. I mean, this is a failed experiment actually for universities and colleges that have bought smart boards or overhead projectors ka ek Zara tha ke, you just buy these things and suddenly quality will go up. It doesn't go up just by getting infrastructure. The real key here, in my opinion, is how do you motivate a learner to become self-directed, ऐसी उनमें आग लगाएं कि वो पूरी जिंदगी पढ़ते रहे बस आपकी जरूरत ही नहीं हो तो बेहतर है. I mean, the whole idea here is to getting people to embrace and love learning. When you fall in love with learning, it doesn't matter what the discipline is. No one can stop you. I mean, you can have a donkey in front of you and you will learn. The trick is, are you hungry to learn? One of the key roles of an instructor is to light that fire, is to motivate and to engage the student into a world that opens doors, imaginary or otherwise, that changes their life. And that's what education is all about. So, पहली बात तो ये है कि motivation की बात है. We underestimate how important this variable is. It has really not a lot to do with technology. It has to do with the human condition of people wanting to learn. दूसरी बात ये है कि किस माहौल में ये हो रहा है. And that we can do a lot. We can create learning environments, that propel people towards learning, whether that's under a tree in a campus, which campuses are designed for interaction and for engagement, or whether it is on a platform and you can engage people here too, but you have to do it differently, right? Or whether it is in your home, you have to create an environment for learning. Parents do that. I mean, parents are our best teachers, aren't they? They have been teaching us since we were born. I mean, if you don't have good parents as teachers, good luck to you. Because us in the university aren't parents. We are second parents. The first parents are the ones who are going to instruct you since you were born. So, mahal ghar ka ho, university mein ho, platform pe ho, they are all common in terms of learning environment, right? And then, of course, there are a series of things that the government can do. Let's come back to the national question that you were raising. कि पाकिस्तान में हम क्या कर सकते हैं where technology plays a role in leveraging learning. So first, let's understand the pedagogical training, skill sets, good practices. So that must come first, and we talked about that earlier on with something like a learning center that can help, right? But following that, I think the problem is bigger than looking at higher education. I mean, you've got 73 million learners in Pakistan in just K to 12, yani primary and secondary, and out of which 20 million plus drop out. They don't go to school, and there are many reasons. Financial could be certainly one reason, and there are other reasons, social reasons. But the most important reason is they are just not interested. This is just boring stuff. कोई फायदा ही नहीं होता है उनको, तो फिर क्यों जाए वो school? So they don't go. So I think when you're looking at national issues, let's stop pretending that you can, buy a platform, invest in this here, invest in that, and all of a sudden education is going to be transformed. You have to think about pedagogical training first, and then you can think about technology second. Now, let me make my last point, which is this. I mean, if there is one growth sector in the entire economy of Pakistan, it's education, isn't it? I mean, it's just going through the roof. You look at our numbers. I just described 70 million are just K to 12, and then you can go college, you can go university. We are the 5th or 6th youngest country in the world. What does that tell us? Education is the most important growth industry for young people. That's where it's at. So what is the government doing in terms of allocating its budget towards education? Is it expanding or is it shrinking? I don't have to answer that. I think you can see what the result is there. Gee. So in terms of resources, if we're not getting money from the public sector, from the government, from our taxes, then where are we going to get it from? Well, there's the private sector. There are banks. There are international groups. There's DFID, there's USAID, there's World Bank. There's an entire banking sector that may want to, private sector that may want to invest in education. I think that is something very promising. The private sector should be opened up. It is already in primary and secondary education. There are as many private sector schools as there are public sector. The problem is those people don't have any voices. The private sector does not have a voice in higher education or in primary education here. हजारों से लोग पढ़ा रहे हैं, लेकिन पता नहीं है कौन ये लोग, कहीं मिलते नहीं है किसी से, पता नहीं है ना शायद वो उर्दू बोलते हैं ना अंग्रेजी बोलते हैं, some of them. They are doing their own entrepreneurial things, but we are not connected. The good news is we already have an industry, the education industry. So I think clearly what you need are interventions where we do need resources. And a lot of these resources can go into building platforms, into creating training programs. And this is my message again and again to everyone I meet in the World Bank or whatever organization. For God's sakes, give the money directly to us. Don't give it to 10 other people in between. Give us the money. We will do the training and we'll be accountable for it. Why is that so difficult to understand in a model that I think whose time has come? Intervention जो कर सकते हैं लोग उनको करने दें. अब जैसे LUMS है, LUMS अकेला नहीं है. I mean, हमारे तरह और भी universities हैं who want to work with this model. So give us the money. Don't give it to 10 other people in between. And let us show you what we can do with these resources. Give us more money when we accomplish certain outcomes. So I think in terms of a national strategy, you have to tier the universities and allow those who are on a different developmental path to make the kind of interventions that will have a very high impact, the kind that Suleiman was describing. You're going to have these courses that are going, hundreds of thousands of people can take these courses. That's a multiplier you can't get by building a couple of brick and mortar universities. So this is a different model. It affords us many opportunities. And that means that online learning has a very important role to play in the development of Pakistan. But it has to be done by remembering and reminding ourselves that learning and pedagogy must come first.
Seeing that, wait, I can hear myself. So seeing that learning and pedagogy must come first and be prioritized, I wanted to also put in light the fact that when this online learning thing began and now where we're at, where most of the universities have actually established certain protocols to follow, and they have, like you say, we are very well equipped to go to the next level, be the ones that approach and be the ones that expand this entire medium of communication and of education and learning. But still, at a ministry level right now, we have heard of a lot of talks happening here and there about education and curriculums. But where do you see, it's just an opinion-based answer, but where do you see this actually happening? Where do you see these talks actually formulating or metamorphosizing into something that can be impactful for both your economy and the students at a lower level, at a development level, at a suburban level, and also from institutions like LUMS or any higher institutions actually connecting at that one point? Is there any discourse or discussion that you kind of are hopeful for or expect happening anytime soon at a greater level?
Sorry?
Well,
for example, Dr. Banuri, who leads the Higher Education Commission, is no stranger to this conversation. He's a very informed and enlightened progressive leader. The problem is he's inherited a bureaucracy that is not able to provide this differentiation that I'm talking about. Right now, it's one size fits all. If there's a new rule, everyone has to equally be affected by it. That's not how most countries and education systems have evolved over time. You have tiered, as I mentioned, you have tiering of universities. You group them because they're just at a different stage. It doesn't mean they are better universities or worse universities. They're just at a different developmental stage. And then what you do is you produce synergies within those groupings, right? So it's not preferential rules, it's just different rules. And those rules allow some to innovate more than others. Some are more concerned about infrastructure and safeties. Others are more, at a different stage, thinking about online learning, for example. So ek to ye baat hai. So those conversations are occurring. And I think what's missing here is the second point that was made, which is we don't have the resources. I mean, you can't work on thin air. I mean, the pandemic is a great example. This has caused havoc in all of our budgeting. Paise nahi hai. How can you run an organization? This is not only the university, any sector, where people are not going to work, where you have all kinds of disruptions going on, and there's a budget squeeze. So in a budget squeeze, you have to think about reallocating your resources. And in this case, the government has to do its part in reallocating resources to the sectors that promise the most growth. And the most growth, traditionally, we think of it in terms of, agriculture, mining, jo sectors hain hamare, which are very important. But what about education? Ye to bilkul list mein, it's way down. And if anything, cuts are made, they are the ones who face the cuts. I think we've got it upside down. We should have an education prime minister, and I mean prime minister, not a minister, but a prime minister who is going to say education comes first. And I'm sure in his heart he does that. So I think until and unless we really, if you want a big game change, you have to reallocate resources. So that's the second big point. And the third big point is, innovation only happens if you let people take risks. Yahan par koi risk hi nahi. They don't, I mean, ulta hai yahan par. Anyone who takes risk gets punished. So if you innovate a new program, for example, you can't implement it. Kyun? Because then we have to let everyone innovate, everyone have the same program. No, you don't. I think this, because the system doesn't have a capacity to be able to really breed innovation. So I think that innovation will occur in the private sector if you allow some of the funding to come in here, if you give some space to educational institutions like LUMS to innovate in this space, because we want to do that. Look at Suleiman, he's a perfect example. He's not the only guy. I point to him, but he's the perfect example of someone who has the qualifications, who has the drive, and who is really going way beyond his call of duty to do kinds of things that actually he enjoys doing. And there are many people like him. Why can't we have 1,000 Suleimans and Mrs. Suleimans or Miss Suleimans? Sorry, Suleiman, I'm using your word very openly here. But I think ये जो ecosystem है create करना है. Is silver bullet नहीं होगी. We need an ecosystem, and those are some of the major ingredients that can change and transform the educational space. So over to you, Suleiman.
No, I think you have summed up absolutely beautifully, and I'll just re-emphasize on the last thing on the innovation part, that you really have to allow private institutes who want to experiment, and we don't mind, many of us came back for a very specific reason. We had we wanted to play safe, we wouldn't have come back. Had we wanted to have a fixed income and with like absolute job security and having a holiday in Spain or things like that, we wouldn't have come back. So many of us at LUMS, or at anywhere else in Pakistan, in top universities, be it Habib or be it Karachi University or an IBA, many of us came back because we really believe that education is a way forward. This is a way, that you can start this have this paradigm shift. And I think government really don't have to do much, to be very honest. The thing is that you just make the right environment and give lots of freedom. It's just decentralization what you need. You don't need centralization. You just need that you're free to do things, and as long as you don't break these 5 rules, you're good to go. Instead of telling that you have to meet the criteria of these 20 rules, this is a very difficult way. So don't push for innovation, and I think if that mindset goes forward, I think many of us would be very happy. We still believe that a lot of things at a national level, but we're still a part of this bureaucratic circle where there's still a big and thick red tape, and things don't go smoothly. So I think let us innovate. Many of us want to innovate in all universities. Work very, it's not that there is this elite group of universities who, I think there's a very wrong message about these things. We work very closely, with public universities. We have consortiums. We recently, I give you one very basic example. Our School of Science and Engineering, for example, on the last Sunday submitted 7 Grand Challenge Fund proposals, for this national funding in billions of rupees, which we want to work on. And every proposal have like 4 or 5 universities, and almost every proposal have a public university in place, some centers in place, international collaborators in place. So when you allow us to work, it's just not that innovation happening in a small area. We go out, we work together. So I think it's very, very important to not to set hard rules. Don't really give us a policy document of 2 pages and then let us work, not giving us 70 pages of checklist that isko bhi karna hai, isko bhi karna hai, isko bhi karna hai, aur usme se ek bhi galti se miss ho gaya to ab zameen pe aa gaya. I think that's where we want freedom.
Yeah, I believe you're right there. It's not a one size fits all, like you say, and saying that there are consortiums being formed and that different institutions, public institutions and private institutions coming together. It's one way of actually addressing their needs, their lack of resources, their standing point, and also kind of accommodating them as well. And, working towards something that is a much more progressive way of dealing with what's happening in the education realm itself. Seeing that we have lapsed 53 minutes, I will take ending remarks from both of you. Not on this topic, but on the topic of a greater run of now, when things are now turning back to normal, even though they're not normal, but the government has announced its different laws of how things are resuming pace again and institutions are opening. Where does it stand? What do you think that the online learning platform itself did, and where would it stand now? Has it opened up more opportunities? Like you said, it has, but where do we go forward from here? Like just a few closing opinions and remarks, and then we'll say bye to the audience.
Let me say a few words first, and then Dr. Arshad can have a sort of more grand closing. So I would say there is no point of going back. Like, don't even think about it. That this pandemic disrupted us in a negative way. And now whatever we have done or whatever we have achieved has to be written off, and then we need to go back as we were yesterday. I think that would be a very bad learning out of this whole activity. This pandemic has helped us a lot in learning that how great we humans are at adopting things. How can we transform ourselves for the new way of working, thinking, and going forward, especially as in education domain. I'm not talking about in the business or in factory setting, or I'm just talking about as a faculty member, as a learner. So I think, and we have learned some great tools and techniques and frameworks and of working together, collaboration, and scaling things up with the help of this pandemic. I think that should be a starting point. Take the best, move on with that, but don't really, this whole mindset जो मुझे बार-बार सुनने को मिलता है, which I think I personally don't really like it, वो ये कि अब हम वैसे ही हो जाएंगे जैसे पहले थे, मजा तभी आएगा जैसे हम, I think that would be a lost opportunity. I think इस pandemic ने जहाँ हमें बहुत तंग किया है, वहाँ सिखाया भी बहुत कुछ है, बताया भी है कि resilience होती क्या है, अगर आप चाहें तो आप क्या कुछ नहीं कर सकते. एक आप imagine करें, like I think it's such a wonderful feeling to think कि आप you wake up in the morning and the world has changed. Like it's a paradigm shift, and you still wake up, you still do your job, and you still try to do what your daily responsibility. In our case, we still ended our semester on time. We still graded. We still try to make sure that there was a decent outcome in terms of students' life. We had our online convocation. A student ended up with their degrees in their hand, started their job with a 1 week delay, and we did all this. So it means that there's a lot to learn from this, and to telling it that jo ho gaya wo ho gaya, ab dobara wahi jana hai, I think we will not be fair to ourselves, and especially in Pakistani context, which has taught us कि यही अगर आपने पाकिस्तान में एजुकेशन को स्केल करना है तो टेक्नोलॉजी का एक बहुत बड़ा रोल है जो प्ले होगा, उसके बगैर नहीं हो सकता. So that's my thought on that.
Okay, on to you, Dr. Arshad.
So you know, anything that will improve the student experience is a good thing. I don't think we have any disagreement there. So this is what I hear Dr. Sulman emphasizing. When we have found some pathways which give students more flexibility, any choices in where you can learn from, and also in terms of time, so there are asynchronous and synchronous. There's a whole bunch of now options which are asynchronous, which means learning anytime, anywhere. So this is basically flexibility, right? So if you build in more flexibility, you're building in more choice. If you're building in more choice, you're giving more options for learners to think about their own constraints that they can overcome. So a lot of people don't want to sit in a classroom morning till night. A lot of people have other things to do. I mean, in other countries, most students right now are working. They work and they go to school, right? So how did they get that flexibility? It's because learning doesn't have to happen starting here, ending here, contained in this specific space. Learning happens everywhere. And mostly, by the way, on campus, even before COVID, most learning occurred outside the classroom, not inside the classroom, right? So keeping those things in mind, this is just a good thing. It's common sense. If you give more students more options, why wouldn't they want hybrid and other online options? And we intend to keep those. So ये पहली बात है. आपका सवाल जो है is a bit loaded because I think people are going to ask the question, are you opening the campus? I think that's the question that people are really asking, not whether online, offline. When are you opening the campus? I got to get back to the campus. I hate this. My life is ruined. Please, खुदा के वास्ते मुझे वापस आने दें. ये legitimate सवाल है. This is a good question. This is a valid question from students. But I also say, I submit with all the humility possible that nobody has a crystal ball when it comes to health and safety right now in the world. I don't talk just only about Pakistan. Tell me one leader in the world who can say, and you can go to countries that were being lauded as the most safe and the most progressive. Go to New Zealand, go to Sweden, go to the Netherlands. हर जगह ये second wave शुरू हो गई है वहाँ पर. There's a second wave of the pandemic. I mean, people are close. Belgium, another good example. They're shutting it all down again, right? So in all humility, can we stop pretending that we know exactly what is going to happen in the next 3 months? We do not have a cure yet. We do have, a situation where health and safety has to come first. If you bring health and safety first, then you have to err on the side of caution. And that's what we are doing at LUMS. So, हमें इतना pressure है अभी कि आप भाई पूरी दुनिया खोल रही है, आप क्यों नहीं खोल रहे? देखें, it's not as simple as that. It's not that we don't want to open. I mean, it's really difficult to keep the campus closed. For God's sakes, I just explained the budget, everything is so much more difficult if you close the campus. But we're doing it for health and safety reasons. And students have to play a huge role in understanding that as we start experimenting with, can we have protocols that are going to overcome the situation we find ourselves in? the standard operating procedures. We have to be realistic here. I mean, we had protocols for smoking on campus. How many students paid attention to that? We have protocols for harassment. Most people pay attention. A lot of people don't. In this case, the difference is you need just a couple of people to break the protocols, and there is a geometric progression of infections that can lead to serious health consequences. But not only that, it's not just students who can take responsibility and say, we are adults, we'll take care of this. Students interact with elder people. They go back to their families. They come back into campus. They deal with older faculty. You can't just, dismiss all this and say, nahi, holus bolus, darwaza khul gaya. Is tarah nahi kar rahe hum. What we are doing at LUMS is we are saying, we already have an open campus. There are 150 people who live there, bhai, including me. I live on campus, right? And so there are another 240 people who go in and out of campus every day. So that's 400 people right there. So when we say the campus is closed, it's closed for classroom learning, but it's open for its critical operations. Now, we will increase that slightly, but we want to do it in a way where we follow protocols that are extremely strict. People say, आप स्टैनफोर्ड की तरह क्यों नहीं खोल देते हैं, वो तो टेस्टिंग करते हैं. मेरे भाई, वो 8,000 टेस्ट हर हफ्ते करते हैं जो पूरा पाकिस्तान नहीं करता है. They have a $30 billion endowment. I don't think Pakistan has that endowment that one university has. You can't compare any university in Pakistan to Stanford, for God's sakes, So I think what we have here is an important conversation about, saying, first of all, we don't know. Right now, anyone who tells you, I know exactly what's going to happen in 2 or 3 months is someone who should not be believed. We really don't know. What we can do is ask experts, consult the doctors, consult the scientists, look at the data, and react accordingly, which is what we want to do at LUMS. Now, IBA decided to open. Good for them. They have their data. They have their way of looking at things. That's their choice. The government has given us a choice, and we have decided right now we're not going to open. We are going to slightly allow a few more students, some in hostels, to see if this can work. I mean, we have seen so many cases in the United States, pick your country, where they were premature in letting people on campus, and it resulted in disasters. We don't want to do that. These are lives at stake. So I think this is a very important and serious question that you raised, Shumalia, but it has many layers to it. And what we're doing is engaging both the students, the faculty, the staff, the medical experts as a community to come together and consider the risks and say, can we gradually do this in a way where we have the capacity to be able to deal in a pandemic world. And so that's where we stand today. Tomorrow it might be that things are different, but that's I think that's the kind of situation where we can continue to not just sit and watch, but ये जो पूरी आपके साथ 1 घंटे बात हुई है, that we continue to experiment, that we continue to engage students in a meaningful way online, and to create that flexibility within a system so that learners find that when eventually we open completely, this is going to be a much richer, a much more valuable learning experience for students than they've ever had before.
Here's to hoping that happens.
Inshallah, it will happen.
I could hear myself. Sorry. But thank you so much for joining in, Dr. Arshad, and thank you so much for joining in, Dr. Suleiman. I hope you expand in your ventures, and I hope that whatever is needed to progress in the situation happens accordingly. And thank you all for joining in as well and listening to this conversation. I would request you to then take your leave. The session has ended. The broadcast has been ended now.